They called him a god in flesh, a Caesar sent by destiny. But when night fell over Rome, whispers echoed through marble halls, rumors of a ruler who twisted power into ritual and ritual into something darker. This was no ordinary emperor. This was Caligula. The knights he commanded were unlike anything Rome had ever witnessed, and every glance from him carried both fascination and terror. Tonight, we descend into the hidden chambers of the empire, into feasts that were not celebrations, but spectacles of fear, obsession, and control. By day, Rome gleamed with marble temples and triumphal arches. Citizens cheered as Caligula paraded through the streets, showered with roses. But by night, the empire shifted behind palace doors.
Tradition meant nothing. His will meant everything.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a man with absolute power decides that nothing is forbidden? The answer lies in Caligula's rituals of excess, where wine flowed like rivers, where feasts never ended, and where fear was as thick as the incense that burned in golden lamps. It began with banquets that lasted until dawn, not ordinary meals, but theaters of submission. Nobles were summoned, senators dragged from their homes, ordered to sit beneath the emperor's gaze. Golden tables groaned under roasted meats and overflowing goblets. But the food was not the point. The point was control. Every glance, every sip, every word spoken was a test. If Caligula laughed, you laughed. If he grew silent, you froze. And if your reaction displeased him, your fortune or even your life could end before the candles burned out. Tell me, could you survive such a night, knowing every breath was judged by an emperor who considered himself divine? To Caligula, loyalty was proven not on the battlefield, but at his table. He turned feasts into rituals where dignity was stripped away. Senators, once the most respected men of Rome, were made to serve like slaves, fetching food, performing menial tasks, even groveling at the emperor's command. Thus Ito gave a performance. Or was it something more sinister, an emperor's way of reminding Rome's elite that they were nothing but actors in his theater of power? Humiliation itself became ritual. The night did not end with feasting alone. Sometimes it became a contest. Caligula thrived on pushing boundaries, testing how far he could go before breaking the spirits of those who followed him. He staged strange competitions, forcing nobles and soldiers to perform acts meant not for joy, but for his amusement. Laughter echoed, but it was hollow, sharp as fear itself. Every smile hid terror. Think of it, an emperor who turned fear into entertainment. Is that not the most dangerous ritual of all? But perhaps the darkest nights were not the feasts, but the worship. Caligula declared himself a living god. Temples were rededicated in his name. Statues of Jupiter were reshaped with his face, erasing the old gods with each demand. And in palace halls, he demanded worship. Senators bowed as if before a deity. Priests whispered prayers not to Jupiter or Mars, but to Caligula himself. Imagine living in a world where refusing to kneel was as dangerous as rebellion. Faith itself was twisted into ritual and fear disguised as devotion. To hesitate was treason. To refuse was death. Whispers tell of gatherings where guests were ordered to wear masks not of gods, but of animals, monsters, even each other. The masquerade was not for joy. It was for power. Beneath the torchlight, nobles were stripped of identity, turned into caricatures, forced to play roles in a cruel spectacle only Caligula understood. Dignity erased, obedience perfected. Do you see the cruelty? When you remove a man's name, his face, his dignity, you erase him. And in that erasure, the emperor's control grew absolute. Sometimes, these nights ended not with feasting, but with silence. A senator who displeased him might be led away by gods, never to be seen again. Terror was always the last guest at his table. Was it execution, exile? No one knew for certain. What they did know was that attending Caligula's rituals was as much a risk as an honor. So I ask, would you dare to attend, knowing one wrong glance might erase your name forever? Were these rituals madness or deliberate acts of control by a man who understood that fear ruled stronger than loyalty? History often paints Caligula as insane, but consider this, insanity may have been his mask. Perhaps he knew exactly what he was doing. Perhaps his rituals were not chaos, but strategy designed to keep Rome trembling. Generations later, we still whisper about those nights, too scandalous for record, too unforgettable to vanish. And isn't that the mark of true power? Not monuments, not victories, but fear, so deep it survives centuries. So when you think of Rome, do you picture marble arches and triumphal processions, or do you hear the laughter of an emperor whose rituals blurred the line between celebration and cruelty? Some stories were never meant to survive, but they do. And now you know them too. The empire grew quiet, yet beneath the silence, whispers of Caligula's rituals spread. Some spoke of the feast of endless night, others of the humiliations senators endured. Devotion into chains. Priests once loyal to Jupiter now burned incense to Caligula. Statues were reshaped with his likeness, towering over citizens. Imagine the fear of bowing to a man you despised, knowing refusal meant death, and worse, believing that even silence could betray you. In this new Rome, loyalty was not measured by deeds, but by the depth of your submission. The night of masks came, remembered in fearful whispers. Guests arrived in splendor, only to be stripped of identity. They wore masks of animals, demons, even each other. Beneath torchlight, power was twisted into theater. Laughter rang pulse, every gesture forced. It was not a feast, but a stage where fear ruled, and no face was truly safe from erasure. Do you see the cruelty? When a man is forced to wear another's mask, he loses more than dignity. He loses self. Nobles who once ruled provinces now shuffled like jesters, every movement dictated by the emperor's gaze. And in those moments, Caligula's authority was carved deeper than any sword. Fear reshaped Rome more effectively than iron or stone. Yet masks were not the end. Some nights ended with silence, and silence was most terrifying of all. A senator might be summoned, then escorted away, his face pale with despair. No trial, no verdict, only whispers. Was it exile, execution, or worthy ratio from memory? Rome learned that survival itself was uncertain, for even breath belonged to the emperor. So I ask, would you dare attend? Imagine sitting at a table where one wrong word could destroy your life. Would you smile when told? Would you kneel when ordered? Or would fear betray you? For in Caligula's Rome, survival was not triumphant, was submission. His rituals were not madness, but deliberate design. Fear was the empire's sharpest weapon. Historians call him insane. Yet what if his cruelty was not madness, but calculation? By weaving fear into every ritual, Caligula ensured no senator, priest, or citizen could feel safe. He blurred the line between religion, law, and terror until they became one. Perhaps his laughter was not madness, but mastery, the sound of an emperor shaping memory itself. Generations later, the shadows of his rituals remain. They linger, not in triumphal arches or marble statues, but in fearful whispers passed through centuries. That is the true legacy of Caligula, not monuments, but terror that outlived him. Rome's empire crumbled, yet his name survived in dread. And that, perhaps, is the darkest victory any ruler can claim. So when you picture Rome, do you see marble arches, feasts, and processions? Or do you hear torches crackle, masks shift, and whispers coil through palace halls? For history is not only sunlight and glory, it is also shadow and fear. And some stories, though never meant to survive, still echo across time. Now you have heard them too. So I ask again, were these nights madness or mastery? To some, Caligula was a monster who let cruelty roam unchecked. To others, he was a strategist who turned fear into law. Every ritual, every mask, every silence became a tool sharper than steel. Rome trembled, not beneath swords, but beneath the weight of uncertainty that haunted every hall. Do you see the pattern? From feasts of humiliation to temples of worship, from masks of shame to vanishing senators' power, was not displayed in sunlight, but hidden in shadows. By day he wore a crown, by night he wore fear itself. And those who survived him carried scars invisible, scars that whispered to future generations of what it meant to kneel. The legacy of these nights did not vanish with Rome. They endured in stories, in half-burnt scrolls, in fearful whispers that crossed centuries. True power does not live in monuments or marble. It lives in memory. And Caligula's rituals, however forbidden, proved that terror could outlast empires. Perhaps that is why his name still claws at history's walls. So what do we make of these forbidden nights? Were they governance or theater? Were they celebrations of strength or desperate masks of fear? Perhaps both. Perhaps truth still lies sealed in stone, waiting to whisper again. And perhaps the question is not what Caligula did, but why Rome allowed it. Fear, after all, thrives only when silence agrees. But one thing is certain, history is not only daylight. It is whispered in shadow. When you picture emperors, do you see crowns glittering in sunlight or shadows flickering against stone? Caligula's rituals remind us the past is darker than legend admits. Subscribe, because more stories lie buried, waiting to remind us that fear is the oldest crown of all.